Hi, and welcome to Fast Politics. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Randi Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, to discuss why fascists attack teachers and how we can push back against Trump's aggression. Welcome back, Randy.
It's always great to see and to talk to you, Molly. It kind of is one of the highlights of my week or month.
Well, the feeling is so mutual. And here we are in this post constitutional America. So tell me what you guys are doing to protect teachers and to try and protect what little of the guardrails we have left.
Let me start with the most immediate, which is this week, we are actually having a national day of action locally in, at this point, hundreds of different places. And
Mm.
it is very focused on what the public and the community really wants, which is they want our kids to have a decent education. They want our schools to prepare our kids for success. They want the strivers and the strugglers amongst us to have opportunity. That's part of what I think, regardless of whether somebody was a Trump voter or a Harris voter, they want a better life for themselves and for their families. So, March for our kids, and we are protecting our kids on March 4th. And we are focused on making sure that that federal education dollar that goes for kids with disabilities, that goes for kids who are poor, that goes for kids who, are the first in their families to go to college, that goes for kids for career tech ed, that goes for kids who are English language learners. All of these funding streams are specific to kids all throughout the country. We're fighting to protect our kids and protect that funding and not let Donald Trump or Elon Musk glom it off for tax cuts for billionaires or
Right.
for block grants for vouchers. That's number one.
Yeah, there is this war on the federal Department of Education too going on.
Right.
So,
We have to do a lot more, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican and independent. We all have to do a lot more to help make sure that families in America have what they need for a quality of life, for entry into the middle class, whichever way you want to say it, for the American dream. And it kind of comes down to the economic opportunity and the education opportunity. And so, what our members are doing is we're tying in all these actions that Musk or Trump or the others are doing to create chaos and confusion and, using that for tax cuts for the rich. We're basically saying, let's get back to first principles, which is we need this funding for opportunity for kids and or the Medicaid funding. Don't take Medicaid away. Don't make things worse. So what we're trying to do is say, we got to make things better. You were elected to make things better, not to make things worse. And we're going to fight against making things worse. And then we're going to fight for making things better. So we're not doing they do 5,000 EOs every day and fight
right,
each one of them. We're
right,
much more about the music of the fight for a quality of life, the fight for the middle
right.
class, and the fight against the cruelty, the chaos, the confusion, and hurting people.
Right. So you're less anti-Trump and more pro working people.
Correct. And ultimately creating the contrast, because think about eggs. They were supposed to do something about the price of eggs. We have a digital billboard in Times Square right now. The price of eggs, commodity price of eggs on January 20th was $6.55. Commodity price of eggs right now, yesterday, $8.05. We're
Yeah.
not talking about the grocery store price. And, somebody now is saying, oh, yeah, it's bird flu. Well, it wasn't always bird flu, but also think about bird flu. What is HHS? What is Robert Kennedy? What are they all doing about bird flu? Nothing that I can see.
As we look at this kind of the trajectory right now, I was talking to someone else earlier at on this podcast who was talking about how so many of the billionaires just bowed down to Trump and were like,
Right.
fine, let's do it. I don't care. we want to get our spaceships into space. But one of the things that
Or our
I
tax cuts.
right, or tax cuts or whatever. But one of the things that I think is interesting is that's not what we're seeing from normal people.
No.
Will you explain to us how normal people are feeling right now?
Sure. And look, one of the
Teachers,
things,
union
yeah.
members. Yeah.
So I've been talking to our members about, because they're really frustrated and they're really scared. And they're thinking about, oh my God, how do we fight back? We want a better life for our people. We want a better life for our families. We don't want our life to be worse. We don't want to lose our
Right.
democracy. And
Right.
we don't want this, wrecking ball, because people are so tired of the status quo. This wrecking ball makes things worse. So what normal people, or I would say non-wealthy people, are thinking about is, how do we decrease costs? How do we increase wages? How do we protect and expand healthcare? And how do we protect and expand retirement security? And how do we make sure our streets are safe, our schools are safe, and we're taking care of our kids? So normal people are thinking writ large about how they have opportunity and how they see a better life, and what does any of this chaos do to them? That's what normal people are thinking about. And for example, one of the things we did in the last couple of days is we questioned why the asset managers
Yeah, so
are
that was
not.
the next
Yeah,
question I
that's
was
what.
gonna ask. So you
So
wrote a letter
yeah,
to asset managers and you said, if you're gonna take care of our pensions, why is the stock in Tesla? Basically, why?
exactly. So
Yeah,
so basically, let me tell you the two things that you would not normally think we would do, but
right.
why it's connected this way. So if
Yes.
normal people need power, what are the ways in which you can fight for regular folks? You can fight in the courts, you can fight in the court of public opinion, you can fight in Congress, and you can fight in commerce. So
Right.
number one, against Musk.
Right.
All this stuff of Doge taking people's and jeopardizing people's sensitive documents and appropriating people's financial documents. We went to court and we said, in terms of the Ed Department, we said, wait a second, if you're filing for a student loan or you're filing for your kid's application for college, you didn't give the government that information so that they can weaponize it or use it against you. So you,
Right.
court, you have to tell them to stop doing that. And we got a TRO for them, a
Right.
temporary restraining order. That's number one. Number two, this week we said, wait a second, we represent a whole lot of people who have retirement assets, and these pension funds own a whole bunch of Tesla stock. Now, if this stock is really, really going to go down, what's going
Yeah.
to replace the income, and so that people can have their retirement security? So that's
Yeah.
why we said, because when we saw the JP Morgan letter that said, ooh, the fundamentals aren't right here. And
Yeah.
then normally what happens if you see a letter like that, the asset managers will do like an opinion letter or do
Right.
something about it. I'm not an asset manager, but we
Right.
represent a whole lot of people who have retirement security. So that's why this week we wrote to those asset managers and we said, okay, what gives here? We're seeing all this stuff that the Tesla stock is, sinking quicker than a Cybertruck in quicksand. Like, tell us what's going on. Is the Tesla stock, okay in a retirement portfolio? That's what we did this week. And, all of a sudden, the Wall Street folks are like, how dare you do that? What do you mean, how dare we do that? We
Right.
represent a whole
Right.
bunch of people who are
Right.
relying on, a defined, on a pension. And if all of a sudden the bottom falls out of their pensions, you're going to say to them, cut their pensions, instead of, why didn't you just take out or divest from the Tesla stock weeks ago or months ago? But all of this is within the whole of being the champions of the working class, fighting, figuring out different ways in commerce, in Congress, in the court of public opinion, as well as the, courts, to fight against what is essentially this abuse of power. That's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
The right gets very mad when you want to diversify, or remember they're very offended by any kind of boycotts. But then this is not actually a boycott. This is just a question of the fundamentals of the company.
And the
And
fact that they're questioning me as someone who represents hundreds of thousands of people who want to make sure that they have secure retirement, frankly, they should be questioning it too.
Well, it is a bit strange too because the right also is very against electric cars, right? And they're doing all of these things to make electric car sales less lucrative.
Right.
So, one of the people who will be punished from this war on electric cars will be an electric car maker
Correct.
like Tesla. I mean, so it does make sense, but this a lot of this is not set up to make sense, right?
I think chaos and confusion and cruelty, those three, they're creating so much activity that they just want people to kind of put their hands over their ears or eyes and just say,
Right,
stop it, or I'm going to just dive into a corner and just tell me when it's over. But, there's not a rock that's big enough or wide enough or strong enough that you're going to avoid it. So we just have to. I go back to thinking, Molly, about King's book, Chaos versus Community, his last book, when he talked about, the civil rights fights, which were also economic fights. And this is really about how do we have a country that has enough of a democracy and enough of a respect and dignity for people and enough opportunity so that regular folks can get ahead. And I think what happened with Donald Trump's election is that there was a frustration about being able to get that American dream. Trump exploited that, and now he's using it to remake the country to be a country for billionaires and basically going back to a gilded age.
why do you think that sort of they are so stuck on teachers, that the autocrats are so convinced that these people who don't make that much money, who are tasked with, in some ways, the least, I mean, these are people sitting at gold desks and they're mad at people who get up at 4 a.m. and go get screamed at by kids. So, why do you think
And
that you
who and
guys
who
trigger them?
and who dig into their pockets to spend
Right,
hundreds of dollars on school supplies
right,
for
exactly.
kids as opposed to being, in a corporate office where you're going to get all your or your supplies.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think it's because what teachers do is teachers help create opportunity and agency for young people and for
Right,
families. So instead of it becomes the savior, or instead of it becomes the autocrat that either fears or compels people or, scares people into compliance or is the one that is beloved, in a cultish way. What
right,
happens for in a democracy is that people actually have their own point of view and people actually have knowledge and civic engagement and they fight things out based upon their own viewpoints. But you have to actually, have knowledge. And what teachers do is they create knowledge. They enable the kids to have the skills that they need, the tools that they need to critically think, to problem solve, to discern right from wrong, to make their own decisions. And in some ways, that's what's really scary to autocrats and really scary to fascists because they want people to think the same way and they don't want this kind of competition of ideas. And I think we've seen that in history and we're seeing that now. You can't otherize people if you actually have an understanding and acceptance of each other. You can't actually say the sky is red when the sky is blue if someone actually knows how to see and to discern fact from fiction. And that's what teachers do.
I want you to explain to us what Trump world taking apart the Department of Education would mean. Like, what are the real time effects of dismantling the Department of Education?
The issue is what the agency does,
Yeah,
not the bureaucracy itself. So, what the agency does right now, could it be more effective? Yes. But there's a
right,
big difference between
right.
effectiveness and
And taking
evisceration.
it away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, what the agency does right now is this, basically $100 billion of spending that goes through formula directly to districts and to kids, does a lot of things to level the playing field for kids who have been marginalized. And that marginalization crosses disability, race, ethnicity, lots of different
But
things. It's
a
basic.
lot a lot of
So
times it makes up the shortfall in red states where there's less state tax, right?
well, the irony is that these programs disproportionately go to red states because they actually,
They need the
they
money,
need
right,
the
for
money
education.
more and they have more poor kids. So Mississippi on a per capita basis has more poor kids than New York does, and therefore they're going to get more money because they have more poor kids. So there's 26 million kids that are eligible for something called Title One, which is the big pocket of money that goes for kids who are poor, and therefore that pays for things like reading specialists to
Right.
help with literacy in a classroom. That goes for the support personnel for kids with disabilities so you can have more than one person in a classroom. And since you got more kids in Mississippi who fall under this, they get more money. So yes,
Right.
but what happens is the Department of Education is the one who metes out the money. The Congress appropriates it, but the
Right.
department metes it out. So what these guys want to do is they want to say either take that money away and give it to tax cuts for the wealthy. So take it from the poor and give it to the rich.
Right.
Or equally pernicious, they're saying, oh, don't worry, let's block grant it. So we'll give it to a state education department.
Right.
So, and then let the state education department decide what to do. So we know, for example, what Texas would do.
Right.
They'll use it
We
for
do.
vouchers. So they
Yeah.
won't give it to the kids who have it now. They'll just give it for
Catholic
vouchers.
schools,
And
religious
well,
schools.
and frankly, what we're seeing in all the programs that are now extant in terms of vouchers, they don't work for kids. They basically go right now, it becomes a tax credit for people who already are sending their kids to private schools. So it's income redistribution. So that's what they're trying to do. It's essentially income redistribution. Take from the poor, give to people who don't need it.
And then part of the Department of Education are Pell Grants, right?
Yes. So
Explain to
Pell
us what
Grants.
Pell Grants are.
So the big formula funding. So the reason I keep on saying formula funding is because the state can't get its mitts on this money. It can't say, "Oh, I want the Title One money so I can buy Bibles in schools." You can't do that. It's formula funding for specific purposes for kids who are poor, kids who are disabled, for kids whose families can't afford college. So they get basically a Pell Grant to go to college. So, and a Pell Grant is not the cost of Harvard. A Pell Grant
Right.
is a couple of $1,000s. So it can help you go to a community college. And the same in terms of, so there's about 12 million kids who get Pell Grants. There's about 26 million kids who get this Title One funding. There's about 7.5 million who gets the IDA funding. And, we shouldn't have this alphabet land of funding. But what it is we shouldn't have these names, but what these are specific funding streams that go for a specific purpose to help specific kids have opportunity.
Thank you, Randi
You're
Weingarten.
welcome. Thank you.